finally working on the circle backdrop. I know I had gotten so many requests, so many people asking about it. This was actually one of the first videos I had uploaded to YouTube, and I had mentioned, nobody was subscribing, nobody was getting likes. I'm like, if this video gets 100 likes, I will show you how I make it. That video has more than 100 likes. I think it's a lot. So sorry for the holdup, but this was one of the first backdrops that I had built. I spent so much money, so much time building it out of different things, see what works, what doesn't work. I hadn't built a backdrop yet. One of the first things I built it out of was wood. You know, I'm like, oh, let me make it wood, make it nice, sturdy. That thing was heavy, big mistake. I realized right then, I'm like, that's not gonna work. That is heavy. I tried a couple of different other things. I even tried like different types of foam because people were using foam, and I'm like, maybe if I get thick foam. It was a big headache. I learned a lot, which kind of brought me to this, and hopefully you're gonna learn from my mistakes and you can build the one we're about to do now. Even gonna include the template, so I made it just like a little template that you'll have. You'll see the angle that we need. We're gonna cut this out, trace that onto our wood supply, and then cut them all out. The plans will be in the link below. I'm actually gonna make this 2 different ways. Put a little extra work into this one to make sure I can give you both options, because this is a backdrop that people like to use a lot, and this was probably our most used backdrop. Actually, it was super easy to set up. The height, we made it the perfect height so we can get through any door. I'll not be able to create this without 2 things. The wood glue definitely gives it the strength over time, but putting this together, you will need a Craig jig. I'll show you in a minute what that looks like when we set it up. Cannot build this without a Craig jig. If you try, it won't have the same strength. There's other ways to maybe do it, but you would be spending a lot more. The Craig jig you can buy anywhere from like 70 bucks to $100, but I'm telling you, it's definitely worth it. I've used it on so many projects. You can use it on cabinets, on everything. It just makes everything a lot stronger. So it's definitely a great product, but to create this backdrop, this is the only way I've thought about it in my mind. Anything else is going to add so much weight to it, and that's what we're trying to do, make this thing light. So if you are going to get the plans, make sure you have a Craig jig, or you're going to purchase a Craig jig, because if you purchase the plans and you just have some basic tools, that you won't be able to get this done. The Craig jig is required. I'll show you in a little bit of why. Alright guys, so in the plans I'm gonna have a stencil that you can cut out and kind of trace along, just so you can get that angle that you need to create the circle. What I'm gonna do is, you're actually gonna see me, I'm just gonna make a little jig that literally just kind of copies this angle, and I'm just gonna use it to be cutting all of my wood for the circle. It's just because it's a lot of cuts. I just wanted to give you a different option. Again, you can use the miter saw, which is the best option for this. Once you set up that one cut and you get it exactly the way you need, it's just multiple cuts and you're perfect. But if you don't have the miter saw, if you don't want to make the jig, I'm also going to show you another way, just using a square and a clamp that you can do. You'll just have to redo it each time, but let me show you real quick. So for this, all you really need is a square and a clamp and the saw. Let me show you how we're going to do it. First, what you're going to want to do is cut out the stencil, the one that I'm going to provide, and it'll give you the angle you need. Plus I'll also give you some more information on doing the angle just with the square, but this will definitely help out a lot. So we're going to trace the angle. But that's the angle we're cutting, this mark right here. All you're going to do is measure from where your blade is to the back of your saw. It's 4.5 inches. 4.5 inches. I'm going to angle it just like this. 4.5 there, and you can use the same piece of paper again, or I'm just following the angle from here, marking it. So I know this lines up with the wood. So just to double check, then you can just use the marker if you want. If you look, that gives us the same angle that we're gonna need. Or you can just bring down the paper and mark that angle as well. So the reason we have 2 cuts is for this. This is what our saw is gonna glide across, because we need a clean cut. It has to be straight. Any angled cut, even though you may feel like you're going straight, can give a little bit of an angle and it won't get the hold that it needs. So we want a straight cut. So that's what this is gonna help us guide. It's gonna guide our saw. Place it where it's exactly on that line, and we're gonna clamp it down. I'm gonna have my blade against the edge just to barely cut across. And you're really just trying to guide this against this. So you're just making sure it guides across here, That gives us the exact cut. Now you're gonna measure the length you need, cut it, and you're just gonna repeat that multiple times. So you can do the jig that I'm making, you can just use a square, but the best option is the miter saw. The main thing is getting a clean cut. You want it straight. You don't want any wobbles in it. It won't have the strength it's intended to have. In the plans, I'll have more about the angle and some different details that are definitely gonna help you out. All we're gonna do is try to line this up with this. It's up exactly with our mark. Something for our circular saw to write against. And it comes in, you see, we're flush all against this. So I'm gonna get this. See how that's gonna write against this, so it keeps our cut straight and clean. This is just some scrap wood that I put together. And then all we're gonna do is start measuring out each cut, start cutting them out real quick. See that clean cut? That's what we're going for. Added this little extra with a 1 by under here. It helps keep it stable, a lot more stable, so I can kind of extend it out as much as I need. Alright, so after you cut your first one, the next line is going to be a straight 90, right? So we're not going to use the next line to cut this, but the next one's going to be an angle again. So all I did, trace this under here. This will be a 90. We know we can flip this around. Put this here, trace it, just trace. This will be our straight cut. This is going to be the angled cut. So this is the angled cut with the straight 90. You'll be skipping every other one. And while you're cutting, every time you cut, make sure you're lifting up this edge, just so it kind of glides on there. Got 2 angled cuts, and then later on, all I'm going to do is use the circular saw and cut straight down, straight 90. So what we have next is all we're going to do is cut the 90, the straight sides. So we have 2 of them that are cut together where they're both angled. So now we're just going to cut the center. So this is a square. We're going to use it similar to how we made that little jig for it to glide. The circular saw is going to glide against the side of this and make sure we get a clean cut down the center. And what makes things a lot safer for me is I use clamps a lot. It's a lot safer. These are like couple of dollars, $3 or $4 or something like that. You can find some for definitely under 10 bucks, and just clamp your piece together while you cut, and you don't have to worry about putting your hands anywhere they shouldn't be. And what this does, have this flush against the side. Alright, so this is the Craig jig I was talking about. Comes with a drill bit and a drill driver. So this tool, what this does is it creates a pocket hole from here coming straight out the side, and you'll be literally drilling sideways, connecting these with actual screws. So your screw will actually be going from this one straight this way into this one using this pocket thing, and that's what really gives it the strength that it needs to hold on till we can get it all glued together. So without this, you won't be able to done, because you're not going to be able to drill at a perfect angle every time, coming from here, coming straight out the side this way into one of these. It's too much of a headache. It's not gonna happen. $69 to $100 depending if you get them on sale or not, but you cannot build this without this tool. So make sure you're gonna get this tool if you're gonna buy the plans and try to build this. You're gonna need to get the Craig jig screws, because they're made to go sideways, and they kind of have that thread that holds it really tight together. They do have cheaper options out there, but I'd rather get something that I know this is tried and true and this works, and I won't have any problems putting it together. And if not, there's a lot of videos online on how to work with it. Let's get this set up where your angle is there, and it's gonna be on the inside of the angle, and you're gonna line that up right at that edge, clamp it in place, and it'll be right there. See how it's right at the edge? We're doing this because the outer side is gonna eventually get cut, and that's when we cut the circle, because if you drill on the outside, you're gonna end up cutting through a screw, and it's not gonna look good. I've done it. So what you're gonna want to do is measure the thickness of the board, which is the one we're using. It says an inch. When you buy it from the store, this is gonna say 1 inch thick, but it's not. It's 3/4. So make sure you know that right. 3/4 right here. Now you will need one of these clamps. Craig Jig makes awesome clamps. They have cheaper ones or a little more expensive ones. I think this is like $30, but they have some cheaper options. What the clamp does is it's gonna clamp down to both and keep it from separating. So once you, a lot of times when you try to drill through sideways, it'll lift this higher or lower. So if you have that on there, it'll keep it from lifting up or down. Want to make sure not to over drill. You're not drilling till it stops because it'll strip the wood. It'll make it worthless. So what you want to do is drill until it pulls that gap clean and tight, and then stop. Don't over drill. You'll strip the wood. Boom. So that's what the Craig Jig does. This is where it can be a little difficult once it starts getting a little bigger. If you have a floor you can use, anything you can do will definitely help this project work out a little bit better. It's just getting a little long, so you kind of have to find a way for it to all fit in one spot. Alright, so to close out the last piece, this is not going to be exactly where you want it. It wasn't on my first one that I built, but it gives me a good circle. And what I'll do is I'll get a spare piece of wood a little longer, and I'm going to place it on there, trace out the exact angles, cut it, put the Craig screws, and it'll close up the circle. Let me show you. So you can see our last one. If we go here, we're going to be a little off here. So what we're going to do is scoot out to the edge. We're going to line up on both. I'm going to get a pencil, and I'm gonna trace from under, so I can trace this line and trace under, and I'm gonna trace both these lines on this one. You want to make sure the edges are right at the corners of each of these. So this corner and this corner gonna be covered. So now when we flip it over, we're gonna cut this line, we're going to cut this line, and then we're going to Craig screw the side, finish closing up the circle. Alright, one of the most important parts is the wood glue. This thing really holds it solid, and it's going to take some good time to dry. So we're gonna wood glue around it, but to hold it in place so it can let it solidify, I'm gonna use a brad nail gun. So the brad nail is gonna nail it from the bottom up, but it's really just keep it in place so that glue will really solidifies around the whole thing, and it's gonna make it solid. That's what we need. I'm gonna let it dry out here for a while. It's usually good to dry over a day. What I did to the last one is I let it dry for a day, and then I kind of went over any air spots that I saw again. I went a little bit more glue. I'll show you in a little bit. I'm gonna let it dry. I'll catch you later and we'll finish it up. Alright, let's talk about what I've done. So what I didn't show off camera is that I've added those pocket screws. So I pocket screwed, they're both pocket screwed to this. The tops are pocket screwed, the bottom and the sides. So those are the pocket screws that I forgot to do. I added them in later by hand, which is difficult, so make sure to do it before. Don't do it like I did. Also, it's also the next day, and so what I did is I added some extra glue around these edges. I had it standing up in the garage. Glue all around. Yesterday in the morning, I think, when I finished, I let it dry all the way till today. And so the main reason for that is you really want that glue to cure before you kind of do any cutting, any moving, any real strenuous work on it. You want that glue to kind of get a good solid hold, and then it's safe to kind of cut around. If you try to do too much like in one day, you're risking not letting that glue solidify, and it's not going to be a great end product. Take your time, get that one thing set up, let it glue, let the glue dry and solidify. There's a couple of spots I'm going to show you right now where we didn't get the kind of hold we want, and I'll show you how we're going to fix that. So before I put it away, I kind of cut around the edges last night. And you'll see there's a little bit of gappage on some of this. Is pretty small. It's good attachment up here. It's a little gap here. For the most part, it's all solidified. You'll see how this one right here is raised up a little bit. So I'll show you what we're gonna do in a minute. To ones that are a little higher than what we want. The gluing part is the most difficult and stressful part, but I think we came out pretty good. Pretty solid too. So alright, so the original one I had made maybe over 2 years ago. Maybe it was a while back. It was one of the first things. So I originally cut it with a router, and I used a circle cutting jig, and I kind of just extended it with this right here. So I found the center, put it in the center, and it just rotated around, and I had it attached to my router and cut it out. You took off like a 1/4 inch at a time, and it came out perfect. It was easy. These are definitely made to kind of get a perfect cut. So if you have a router, and you can look for a circle cutting jig online. You'll see a lot of different YouTube links to it, or you can just buy one. I had bought one and just extended it a little bit to the exact size I wanted it. Pretty easy. Just walk it around slow, and in about 4 circles you're pretty much knock out that whole thing. Smooth cut, doesn't do a lot of tear out, so I like that one. But for those of you that don't have that tool, which can be kind of expensive, they do have some less expensive options. But we're gonna try to cut the large circle with a jigsaw, which isn't the best option, but you can get it done. So you're gonna measure till you find the center of it, and then I'm gonna show you how we I'm gonna outline the circle. So you've seen me make these before. This is just gonna be a 1 by whatever with a screw going through, and we're gonna use that as the pivot point. So you can see the mark we have. If you look online, there's a lot of YouTube videos on making a jigsaw circular cutting jig, and then you're just gonna kind of follow it around. I'm pretty tempted just to try this going slow. If it's a bad idea, I ruin the whole thing. I have to start over, which I've done before. Well, I think I'm gonna try freehand, and if I screw it up, you know to use the jig. Whew, my arm hurts. Cutting slow all the way around took me a while, but I think it came out pretty clean. So now we're gonna go around the edges, look for any gaps, and I'll show you how to fill those up. This is what we want. When you go to the next one, you see a little bit of a gap. There's 2 in a row here, and then we kind of close up again here. We're fine. A lot of this is fine. There's just like a little gap or anything on only a couple, and that's gonna happen. Alright, so now that everything is as tight as it should be, what we're going to do is just go around the whole thing and make sure it's all nailed together. Alright, so what this is a nail punch. So I'm going to go around, and any nails, there's only a couple that didn't go all the way flush, that are kind of sticking up a little bit. Just hit this with the hammer right over it, and it'll kind of even it out. Wood filler over all the holes, cover it up. Plastic wood filler. Alright, so depending if you're gonna keep going to make this foldable, we're gonna cut down the line right here. If you're not gonna make it foldable, that nail filler you did, I recommend filling this in all the way, sanding it all the way down, going over it again to find any spots, and wood filler all over again. Let it dry, sand it, and you're sanding smooth for a smooth finish. And it should be very, very minimal. If you have to, sand it down, wood filler, and keep you going until you see it smooth. It'll barely be visible, and then once you paint it, you're not going to see it at all. Especially if you use the primer. The primer's a little thicker, and you won't even see it. But if you're gonna make this foldable, you don't have to do that, because this is where we're gonna cut the line at. All right, let's get started. Look how solid that is already. All right, make sure you double check before you cut this, and just use some clamps and whatever you have for a straight edge, because you want a clean, straight cut. Always make sure you're cutting with the new blade when you want a smooth cut. That is an old blade. That's the original blade that came with it. I should have changed it out a long time ago. The circle backdrop. Oh my goodness, this has been causing some trouble. So the original one that I built is non-foldable. It's solid backdrop. I love it. It works out great. That's the one that I think, if you have the transport, choose that one, build that one. It's sturdy, it's strong. We've held it out, and it's been great. But I know some people, everybody loves the foldable stuff, especially, I understand you're just getting started. Maybe you want something you can fold in your car or something like that. So I've been trying my best to kind of make this, keeping it light, keeping it sturdy, still keeping it strong. I think I may have figured out a new way to kind of keep it still light and portable. The hinges on a foldable backdrop, really, they just don't work. Since the backdrop's so big, folding it up and down, it doesn't give it that strength that you need. So I'm actually separating two separate pieces, and I'm trying to get them to overlap with each other, kind of sit on top of each other, see if it works out. A lot better. It's been raining a little bit, so now the sun's come out and it's pretty humid. So now that we have that on there, what we're really gonna do is get the top placed on there. Two people might be better for this side, and then we'll screw from behind those wooden pieces, so we know next time once we take it off, it'll slide back in. Hey, what's up everybody? Thanks for watching. I'm gonna do a little quick demo on the setup. This first one is actually the full solid backdrop. This is the one that we've used for years. Love this one. The next one is the new two-piece circle backdrop. I'll show you that one in a minute. The one I have the link before, it's the two-pipe system. I really like this one because you can take it apart. It's easier to transport, put together, take apart. But if not, I know a lot of people use those where you can tighten and just lift up and down. That'll work as well. If you're doing it indoors and you don't want to, you can put just the single one, but I actually put two. And what I do is this top one will go a little higher, and then we have these loops right here that we can just tie the balloons to. It actually keeps the balloon garland even higher than a backdrop, so it goes all the way around and definitely makes the whole backdrop look even bigger. which I'll show you on the second one that I put up. Indoors, pretty simple. Outdoors, if you're outdoors, you're actually gonna wanna add a second pipe. I have actually I'll show in the plans where I have a second one, and then you just put a second base, and what that's gonna do is give you 2 good stable points in case there's any wind or anything. You have it solid down, it's not going to go anywhere. Definitely you don't want this out in like crazy weather, wind or anything like that. Anything will blow over, but just to be outdoors, we're always safe. And we just added the second base right there, and then what we did, put weights on both sides, and then the balloon garland goes around and it hides all of that, but it gives you 2 good stable points. Just like if you put a backdrop outside, you wanted 2 pipes and something there. With a circle, if you don't and you're outdoors, you're kind of risking it, so it's always better just to have 2 good stable points. Second one, so you can see up there is usually where we attach the balloon garland, so the balloons would attach to the pipe, come all the way around, and we usually have a second pipe. We usually have it where you can put a pipe here or a pipe on this side, and wherever your garland goes, it covers that pipe. Increased stability. So if I had to choose, I would choose the full background. That's where you kind of cover up the line. That one works out perfect. The only problem is transportation. If you have a way of transporting it, maybe a cargo trailer, that's what we used, and it fit in there perfect. I've even put it in the back of my truck. I have an 8-foot bed truck. I put it in the back and just kind of strapped it down, and we've had no problems with it. But that's why it took me so long to come up with the one that cuts in half, because I know for a lot of people that's not an option, and maybe you're just starting and you're like, I don't want to invest in a full vehicle or a truck or anything yet. And we created the half one, so that's a good option. And we also got some pretty good builds coming up, so don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.